I was born in 1945, and by the time I was a teenager, John F. Kennedy was running for president, and I was completely taken by his candidacy. He was a young man, he was vibrant, he had new ideas, and I thought it was just completely fascinating. So I started following politics around his election, and then the civil rights movement was growing, and there was a lot of talk about politics during the civil rights movement. So the combination of the two made me very interested.
My story in politics pretty much all starts with having worked in a nightclub when I was 19 years old. One thing led to another. I met a number of elected officials, primarily in the African American community. The Black political empowerment movement was making strides in Philadelphia, trying to elect members of city council, Congress, and ultimately mayor. Meeting more and more of these individuals. I've since graduated from college, but started having conversations with some of the folks that I'd met through the nightclub who were now in politics, some of the leading names in Philadelphia politics.
I grew up in LA, California, and my mother was heavily involved in community affairs and politics there. This is the beginning of real empowerment for African Americans. This would be about the late 60s. And so my mother was involved in a lot of that work. And then my dad had been in the military and had always been a real kind of patriot. Because I had been in public service in the military. I actually volunteered to serve in the military during Vietnam, and I was on my way to become an Air Force officer. I set up to go to the Air Force Academy. Then I decided I was a conscientious objector. But what I took out of that was I still believe that everybody ought to serve one way or the other, in the military or in public service. I think it's important to serve.
Well, I went through the era that people my age would describe as the Vietnam War era, and I was fortunate to have some God-given football talent and a good coach, and so I went to the University of Pittsburgh and then Bowling Green playing football, and realized how fortunate I was. After getting beat up with my knees and other things, I still felt like I sort of escaped going to Vietnam. So many of my friends, people I knew who were killed there and maimed and injured. And I really felt like I owed my community something. And so I started thinking about it. I started going to city council meetings before I graduated. I started running when I was 23. So I served on city council for 13 years without any real, in any way, thought for the long term of being a full-time politician, which mayors end up becoming. And then, lo and behold, our mayor ran after 3 years of a 4-year term. He ran in his third year for Congress, and I had been city council president for those 3 years, and so all of a sudden, I became automatically mayor. And I wasn't quite sure that that's really what I wanted to do. My kids were still young. I was building a law practice. And I think it was about 4 months later that I turned to somebody and I said, I think this is always what I wanted to be when I grew up. I just didn't know it.
I had worked for two mayors. I was a top executive in the administrations of Andrew Young and Maynard Jackson. And I was certainly impressed by what they were able to accomplish. Ultimately, I realized that I'd been talking to young women especially, very young women, teenagers and college students, about how the world was open to them to do anything, but yet I had this great fear myself of being on a public platform. And I said that I was hypocritical. So over a period of time, the combination of counsel from Andrew Young and Maynard Jackson and a few other people made me think that I was running from something as opposed to really seizing the opportunity. So I decided in 1999 that I would throw my hat in the ring, and that even if I didn't win as mayor, I would be able to influence the public debate around the campaign if I was a candidate.
Working in government and then becoming an elected official is a fairly sizable jump. Not everybody does it. Sometimes people think we're a little crazy for doing it, but I think that there's usually a compelling reason for making that kind of leap. In my case, there was a fiscal crisis going on in the city of Fitchburg, and frankly, if I saw that there was leadership that was solving the issue, then I would have been very supportive of that. But when you see a leadership vacuum, when you see a massive problem and no one's solving it, I think I'm drawn to those kinds of situations.
I decided to run for mayor in the year 2000. And the principal, I guess the principal reason I did it is because the city had gotten to a state that I thought was unacceptable. Someone had to do something about it. What really just sort of was the last straw for me was one day after Young had been sent back to Cuba, or maybe just around that time. There was a picture in the local news of an African American woman and a guy, sort of redneck looking, standing on a street corner, and he's holding a Confederate flag, and she's standing right next to him with a sign that says "Cubans go home." And so the condition of the city, the fact that we were still not coming together as a community, and the fact that I had spent so many years in campaigns and really trying to promote people from the private sector to run for office, I said, you know, somebody's got to do something. And of course, all my friends thought I was nuts and I shouldn't run. I had absolutely no chance. The first poll that came out, I was at 3%, which with the margin of error meant I could have been at -1%. So not a lot of people gave me a lot of hope, but we did it.